Welcome everybody. Before we get started, we need to talk a little bit about what you need in the course, what to expect in the course, and how this course is laid out. In addition to that, we're going to talk about how to essentially get the most out of your course. So first things first is you need Xcode. Now I'm at developer.apple.com/Xcode, and you can see that Xcode is the software that you need to make apps. Now every environment is set up a little bit differently. So what this means is that if you want to make Apple products, it's best that you use Xcode. Now there are third-party platforms like you can use Unity 3D, you can make an HTML5 game and then put it into Xcode here, but most of the time you need to use Xcode. In fact, if you use Xcode, it's the best way to get an app onto the App Store. And ever since Swift 2 has come out, okay, Swift and Swift 2, which is the second version of Swift, ever since Swift has come out, coding and building apps has never been easier. Swift is amazing. As a person who started coding in Objective-C, I can tell you that Swift is awesome. All right. Now, within Xcode, you get a lot. All right, you get a lot of different kinds of functionality. So with Xcode, if you're building an app for your friend or just for the App Store, or you're working for the United States government building top secret apps, you use Xcode. It's a very complicated program, but it's really effective, and I love using it personally. Okay, and so I'm just scrolling down some of the features that Xcode has. So you have to go and use Xcode here. Now, you have to also use a Mac. Now, there is ways to get Mac onto PC, but for the most part, this course will only cover how to use the Mac version of Xcode. If you are experienced enough that you can go and you can get Xcode on a PC, then I welcome you to do that. However, I would really recommend just getting a Mac. From experience, when I tried to use Xcode and upload something to the App Store, it didn't work. But it is possible and people do it, but keep in mind it's a little bit more tricky. Okay? So, now that we've talked about what we need, and you can just download it here if you want, we need to talk about what to expect in this course. Now, this course here is highly practical. And what that means is that I spend more time actually doing and actually showing you what to do versus talking about theory. Now, 95% of the other teachers who do and work in this space don't do that. They do not work on the theoretical side. This course is all about you building a game as fast as you possibly can to get it to the App Store as fast as you possibly can. Now, along the way, I will explain things to you. I will explain what everything is and what everything does. And it comes from the belief that the more you build, the better you get. And as a game developer, and games, by the way, are one of the most creative forms of programming. So as a game developer who's released a ton of apps to the App Store and elsewhere, and even an Xbox 360 game, I highly recommend that you try and build as many games as you can. So when you go and build the projects in this course, there's a little challenge after all of them, and you want to complete that challenge. And on top of that, if you take a bit of time to expand upon the games that I've already given you and make maybe 5 different versions of the same game, that's the best way to learn. Okay? So where can you use these games? Well, you can upload them to the App Store, and you can add them to your LinkedIn once you're there. There's a little section in LinkedIn called the projects you've released. Now, I guarantee you, if you upload an app to the App Store and you put in your game within your projects that you released, you will get a lot more attention. A lot more attention than you are now as of LinkedIn. Now, of course, with LinkedIn, you want to start networking as much as you can, but as soon as I personally started putting all my stuff on LinkedIn, I started getting a lot of really good job offers. Okay, and if you're looking to work in the industry, I recommend just making as many games as you can and putting those into LinkedIn, and eventually someone will contact you as for hiring to become a programmer. I get about four a year, four good offers a year, and one of them is actually pretty stellar. But the only problem with me is that I actually make more money as an entrepreneur than they would pay me. So that's really good. And want to tell you that secret. I just want to say, if you release a lot of games, a lot of very simple games, then you can go and put that into your LinkedIn, and people will contact you because while you're not releasing, other people are, and you'd be surprised how many really smart people never end up releasing a project. So it is the secret to success no one really wants you to know. All right, so the games that we're going to be making in this course are fairly simple. They'll take about an hour for you, an hour to 2 hours, maybe a little bit more than 2 hours to do. So having said that, there are games more like Floppy or Flappy Bird. There are more games. They're a little bit easier a little bit simpler to make, and they're a little bit simpler to play. They're not games like GoldenEye 64 or Minecraft. These are not the kind of games we're going to be making. They're going to be simple mobile games, and there's two reasons for that. First of all, it makes there's a lot of games that are really simple that get millions of downloads on the App Store. So I highly recommend that you do that too. But when you start making games by yourself, you will see how hard it is to do. And take it from someone who has made too many games that were too big and failed because they're too big, is you want to start off with a bunch of small games. Okay? Release a bunch of small games to the App Store before you release your big game. In fact, there's a lot of developers that do this, and they actually get a lot of success for doing that. So keep in mind that the scope of these games are about the size of Flappy Birds. And you want to start off simple. And with this course in particular, the graphic style is going to be very minimalist. And I highly recommend that if you're trying to build games by yourself, that you adopt a minimalist aesthetic too. Art is actually really difficult to put in games, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. Now we're going to be making every single thing, and we do make art in this course, and we make every single art asset within the course here. So there are no extra courses or extra artwork to download. We make it here, and we use and in the course we use Photoshop and Illustrator. So you can use your own version, but that's what we'll also be using here. You can download the free versions for the 30-day trial as well. Okay, so lastly, this course is set up in a way so that every part of information is compartmentalized. So we go through every single little nitty-gritty thing that you need to do to make a game, instead of just having some theoretical parts. But having said that, so if you take for example, the first game, make a space shooter, and you start off at the beginning, by the end of the course, you'll have a game that works perfectly. However, during the middle parts, the game might not work properly. And why is that? Well, it's kind of like building a table. Imagine you go to IKEA, you come home, and you build half a table, and you wonder why the table isn't standing up. And it's probably because you have 2 legs instead of 4 there. Well, the games that I show you how to build work the same way. What they do is sometimes they might have the game equivalent of having 2 legs instead of 4. They might not work with the code that I give you. So just keep in mind that everything will work at the end of the lecture here. All right. So this pretty much concludes the tutorial. Let's go ahead and let's start making some games.